Yeah, I mean, who here listened to me last year? I came in over live streaming, and you kind of. I told the peers, it's kind of, yeah. Online. Well, we talked about the book that Cristóbal Cobo and I wrote called Visible Learning. So it's not called Visible Learning, it's writes in Spanish, so it's really called Aprendizaje Invisible. And I introduced some of the core concepts of that last year. And since that book came out, over the past year, we've counted over 50,000 downloads in 1 year for an open resource on innovating in education, using social media smartly. So it's been a great journey. It's really taken off in the Latin world. In the English-speaking world, they have never seen it. So we're translating the book into English, but compressing into 2 chapters of the next book called Nomad Society. So I wanted to share a little bit about that. I really don't have much of an organized talk for you. I've got a couple slides which I'm going to show real quick. Then I'll give you a quick preview of Nomad Society, if that's okay with you. Is that okay? Okay. So I'll just do a quick review of what we talked about last year so we get up to speed. Interrupt me, please, because I hate talking and things when people are eating, drinking beer and stuff. We're supposed to have a conversation, okay? I may just sit down on a bean bay and let one of you guys take over, okay? So that's how I like to do stuff. I think this quote, which is actually the title of a book by Douglas Rushkoff, Program or Be Programmed, I think it really ties into what Carrie was talking about very well. In essence, if you don't take charge of your social network, we'll take charge of you. So in this case, I think that, you said that Facebook is not a social network, but I think it is a social network. It's Facebook's social network, not ours, right? Because we're allowing it to program us. On the other side, I really liked hearing from DreamDo and Xtune about what they're doing, because it's about taking social media, social networks, and doing something with it. So there's a purposive element towards this. So you're able to use networks and actually do something. So I really appreciate that. And it addresses these so what questions. I think that's missing from so many other things. Purposive application. So the invisible learning revolution is really about connecting formal, informal, non-formal, and even serendipitous learning. I think Becca's going to touch on that a bit. Together into a broader paradigm that really makes us rethink our approaches to technologies and social technologies, how we apply them in learning and education. And I hate using words learning and education because I think we need new words to describe the possibilities that we're starting to run into. On the other hand, I have to speak in English to international groups, so I think that it's up to us to really create some new language. So my main point is that somehow we've industrialized our education systems, and now we're focused on producing packaged brains like this. By the way, this was the cover of the book that we originally wanted. But the publisher said, no. I can't figure out why, so we have a much more boring picture, and it's drawing colors and stuff. But the reality is that we really wanted to make fun of the system, and we want to make fun of the system and to really illustrate that we are producing packaged brains within education, within schools. Everybody looks the same. We fit controlled industrial formats, and it's kind of nuts. But as we know today, that's changing. And I came out of that so hi, my name is John. I would be lying to you if I said that it doesn't have any value, right? To have a PhD is a wonderful thing. It's like a license. Lets me go up in crowds and just say kind of whatever I want. People take notes and nod, and it's great. But I just think that we could do better. And the problem is that we've been so afraid of trying anything else that we haven't tried anything. And that means that we're failing quite universally, which is also a bit of a challenge to say in Finland, which the rest of the world thinks is the god of education. Right? I brought my camera to some interviews and see what you guys think a little bit. So, what do these people all have in common? Walt Disney, Woody Allen, Florence Nightingale, Václav Havel, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs.
They're all school dropouts?
Yeah! They're all school dropouts. Or they're refugees from education, or they never survived, but they drive what we're doing today, right? So Walt Disney dropped out because he thought his time would be better spent making animations. Woody Allen was kicked out of college, all right? He's producing brilliant films. Florence Nightingale, of course, never had proper access to education. Václav Havel was denied access to educational opportunities. Bill Gates dropped out of Harvard, and Steve Jobs dropped out of community college. Right? Steve Jobs never got into a great school. Yet, Apple's producing stuff that they're saying, this is what we need in education. So this is what makes really smart kids. How do I know? They dropped out. So with the Invisible Learning Project, we wanted to look at or investigate, so what is really going on that made these people successful, that really enabled them? So obviously, schooling doesn't always equate to success. If we think that there's a high level, the relationship to high level of education equals a high level of success, we're completely wrong. Statistically, you'll make more money, but it doesn't mean that the social impact you'll have or what difference you make in life. So how do these people learn? Or what is invisible learning? So invisible learning is a social-technological archetype, so to say, for a new ecology of education. So one of the things that we have with, for example, social media helps create new opportunities for us to investigate and really work with multiple and parallel forms of teaching and learning and schooling each other. And as the nature of work changes, so does learning. And it starts to look at education or what learning or how we do things as being part of the spectrum of things. So this is what I like to call the invisible learning spectrum, where we look at different components: formal, non-formal, informal, and serendipitous learning. I've got notes here, so if I read these, I can find them. Yes?
Is your presentation
Yeah, sure. Yeah, notes here. We'll put on the name. Yeah, no problem. So let me define these real quick, okay? Because I always struck informal and non-formal learning. So formal learning is what we're used to in schools. Non-formal learning is learning that occurs in a formal learning environment and we don't recognize it. So workshops and seminars really fall into that category. This is a non-formal experience, right? Informal occurs through a variety of places, interactions, like if you're a study abroad. What is it when you really start to study a culture that's outside of your own? What are you learning? That's really informal. And then sometimes you stumble upon things, and that's serendipity. And serendipitous learning. Serendipity is also something that we have to enable. So we have to create opportunities for the serendipity to emerge. We have a cut-and-paste society. And so part of this cut-and-paste society that we have a broadened range of options. So we have tools like YouTube, wikis, hip-hop, Twitter, all examples of a cut-and-paste society and cut-and-paste ideas. But we're able to blend these things in new ways, create new meanings out of things, in ways that are very personal to us, rather than ways that are very personal to other people. Suggested new applications for technologies. Technologies, too often, I believe that we misuse technologies. And we wrote about this quite a bit in the book, that too often we put technologies in the way and it winds up obscuring individuals, people, or actual learning that's happening. So what we need to do is make technologies invisible, make learning a bit more visible. And as technologies are becoming much more, fluid, we're using these things in various ways. We're always connected, we're interconnected with various devices. I was commenting today, even our clothing is changing to accommodate technologies. I wear gloves that have capacitive fingertips, so I can use my phone outside when it's cold. And these things are really changing. In the same way, we also need to look at how we change our approaches to learning as well. Visual learning is not the answer to all of our problems. We're not pretending to have the answers. I'm not going to pretend to know what I'm talking about. Well, maybe a little bit, but it's just a start of an honest conversation. And this conversation, we want to be open and provocative. So we're not trying to make any specific predictions, but rather establish some frameworks and some new language that we can use to talk about how we can build better futures. Makes sense? Another way is, this is a sign that's by a museum next to my house. It says bits and pieces put together to present a semblance of a whole. It's a quote from Lawrence Weiner, who makes his art by taking sticks of dynamite and throwing them in the California desert. So we start to look at where we are today and where we're going. In the first chapter of the book, we talk about 3 paradigms, which I unfortunately call societies 1.0, 2.0, and 3.0. But the bottom line is that we're moving from fundamental relationships these to be very simple, easy to define, to ones very complex and creative. I like to say teleological. So really taking onto what Carrie was saying, that teleological networks are networks that are so inherently complex themselves, they create their own goals. They create their own outcomes. That for us as outsiders, or even sometimes as insiders, we do not know what the network is doing or where it's going, but it's generating its own goals as a complex system. It's big stuff. Conceptualizations of order used to be hierarchic. I think that the X-Tune guy really spelled this out. That used to hire their organizational information is very easy to place in hierarchies. But actual knowledge is something that is quite heterarchic or quite non-organizational. So if you look at how knowledge systems work within organizations, it looks like spaghetti and meatballs than it does a very clear pyramid. We're looking for more synergies rather than mechanical relationships. And we're being asked to design our worlds rather than having it happen designed for us. It used to be that if your grandfather was a baker, your father was a baker, you were expected to become a baker. Right? And chances are your last name is also Baker. Right? But that's changed. Now people are being asked, okay, so design your job. Because these old jobs don't exist anymore. So it's a big stuff. Change process is much more creative destruction than assembly. Reality is contextual rather than being objective. How do you see the world? How do you use media, social media, to see the world in new ways, to share your visions of the world? How are we using, say, augmented technology to paint another layer onto things? It's very contextual. And the places, of course, globalized rather than local. It's on here. It's through globalized communication. Yes?
Could you talk a little bit more about creative destruction?
Yeah.
The change process.
Yeah, well, change used to be something that's very slow, and organizations are like, okay, it's kind of like listening to the Chinese government. This is their 5-year plan, and then after that, we'll have another 5-year plan, and that. Now we are often just tearing down organizations, tearing down our plans, and starting all over. Startups are discovering this. Just at a startup conference in Vienna about 3 weeks ago. Yeah, it's a great one. It was Pioneers Festival. Gotta go. Got 2,500 startups, VCs, just great stuff. But the idea of writing a business plan is obsolete. Right? In 1.0 society, you would write a business plan, you share it with a bank, you get funding. Well, the world is changing so much now that by the time you finish writing a business plan, your business is obsolete. You got to start it all over. So now the new advice is don't bother with the business plan. Crowdsource what you need. And this is huge stuff. You have to pivot. There's another term that's coming in. That's another word for change everything. You have to pivot your business. And these are forms of creative destruction that are emerging. Now, the 3.0 paradigm isn't quite where we're at yet, but we seem to be strongly trending in this direction. So, when we start thinking about how this applies within the education world, we look at meanings which, in a traditional format, were dictated, like me talking to you. I'm telling you what you need to know. Teacher at the front of the classroom has all the knowledge and authority to tell you everything that you need to know. But now, because everything is changing so fast, facts aren't facts for very long anymore. The meaning is something that's socially constructed. Right? So for people in this room, this is a huge development opportunity. Teaching new technology when I went to school was confiscated at the door. Now you'd be lucky to get it back at the end of the year. It's changing now. But we're seeing that the best uses of technologies are just embraced for what it is, and used as part of an ambient digital universe. Schools used to be just located only in buildings. Now, of course, you have online options. But there are some initiatives that are popping up around the world that's embedding learning in public spaces. So you can go to a cafe and have a learning experience. Go to a bar and have a learning experience. So they hear for the Shibuya University Network. Shibuya University Network. It's out of Tokyo. That's what they do. And they've created mechanisms to recognize learning that's going on in very public places, teaching and learning. So in that sense, we all become teachers, we all become learners, and it's really building a smarter society, rather than one that just dumbly consumes whatever is being transmitted to it through YouTube. When I went to school, and I think this is unfortunate reality still today, is that parents view schools as daycare, right? It's where you put kids so you don't have to worry about them. But in a world that's changing so rapidly, and many people are suddenly finding themselves unemployed, I think schools are someplace for all of us. The other side of it is that maybe we're looking at a future, your future, where only 25% of us have jobs. You don't need daycare anymore, or as much daycare. And I think that forces us to reconsider that. Hardware and software are just what they are, and we're looking for co-workers, entrepreneurs, and startups, rather than assembly line workers and government bureaucrats. So those jobs disappear. So this is kind of a very basic slide, but this is like, say, using technology when you're learning at home versus at school, and it's probably not the best example, but we did it because it's quite obvious in the separations and stuff. But we're looking at models of depth that people have using technologies to pursue their own interests rather than something that's a little bit flatter or you're following others. Invisible paradigm, cost, we believe, is much lower. And this is also reflected in corporate culture, corporate learning. About up to 93% of what's learned within organizations is informal. But we spend 80% of our budgets on formal learning, right? If you're a venture capitalist, think about this. Think what we should be investing in. The rate of return on formal learning is quite high. Learning is high versus low. But the thing is that once we start talking about quality issues, then we really focus on formal learning because we think we know how to measure quality in formal environments. We sit and take tests. Really just measure how well we get that information.
Excuse me.
Yes?
I was thinking about some places where they have, let's say, big 500 people and they much of people do not want to take care of it. They learn by themselves and it must be organized. And in the future too, I think. So, if this corporation doesn't take care of that, so who can they trust that they people will keep up their learning as high as this approach?
That's a really important question. It's a big question. Because I think it focuses on the assumption that people need to be externally motivated to learn, right? That if we don't put kids in schools, they're not going to learn anything. I mean, what if we put kids in schools and taught them how to walk? They'd all be using crutches or going around wheelchairs, right, rather than walking. Learning is something we do very naturally as human beings. Something that's very natural and is something that we do. Now, within organizations, if they're looking at enforcing behaviors or do some sort of behavior modification things, their informal ways are very effective. If you're looking at professional development and people are not developing professionally, they should be looking at hiring different people. That's the bottom line. If people cannot keep up with the changes in their fields, they probably should not be in that field. They should be doing something else. And that this is a cultural question as much as it is anything else, that people need to recognize that we're always learning. That learning doesn't happen during certain hours of the day for certain years of your life. That once you have a degree, that doesn't mean that you know everything. That does not mean that you know what you need to know, because things are changing. 1 + 1 doesn't always equal 2. In electrical engineering, it never does. It's 2-ish. And things change. Our bodies of knowledge are always changing. Our pace of communication is always changing. And people need to keep up with that. So if you're in a company, you're at a meeting, and you're looking around, and if you quietly ask yourself, would this conversation be any different if I wasn't here? If the answer is no, you better leave. Get a different job, because they're looking at getting rid of you. What new value can you add in? And this is a value-added economy. So, yeah, that's a really good question. And we talk about this in the next book, which is called Nomad Society. It's an edited volume, and it's a mess right now. But I invite you to go to that URL, which is not public, get a private preview of what we've been writing. A couple chapters are kind of right now. One's missing. The introduction's missing, but the rest is really good. And so I invite you to read it, and I'll show you just a quick tour of this if I'm not out of time. Which time do I have? These look like balding. So, start with the introduction, rethinking the capital development nomad society, as largely was talking about, leads up to that ugly chart I shared with you. Cristóbal Cobo contributed a chapter on skills and competencies for nomadic workers. And a nomad is what I label as a person who is really the 3.0 worker. Who work anytime, anywhere, with anybody, adding value to the organizations or the work that we have. And I like to say that we're nomadic because our knowledge that we have is very individual. What I know is different from what you know. Skills and expertise are very different. And the question is, how do we apply them? The other observation is that there's a growing divide between work and jobs. So it used to be, you asked me, so what's your work? Well, I work at a sawmill. You do that your whole life. You can expect to retire. Now we're starting to go from job to job to job to job. But your work is something that's personal to you. Who are you? What is it that you're doing? What is your work, right? So maybe today you're a teacher. A year from now, you'll work on a startup. That would fail. So a year after that, you'll be unemployed. Go back to university. You're taking on these different jobs. But your work is something where you're finding your purpose of application, where you're creating value. Tue Besselink, who is a teacher, or actually a university teacher at the University of Amsterdam, talks about transforming the idea of being a teacher to that of a choreographer. And that's just a beautiful chapter. I'll leave that to explain, but please to read it. Because it's really forces us, or asks us to reconsider how we're approaching teaching and learning and creating something that's going to be beautiful. Crystal Hartkamp talks about Sudbury schools and democratic education. If we do not know what the future is going to be, what jobs will exist, why should we teach kids for jobs that existed 20 years ago? And so she talks about democratic education as a plausible solution. My personal view is that it's not for everybody. but I think it's the most promising thing that we've created so far. So it's very much worth the read. Peter Spinder wrote a chapter of Nomad's Business School. So it's based on, I'm proud on it because I took the Nomad's name I coined. I created a business school on it in Amsterdam, which is actually it's also a democratic school. But it does have a startup incubator, which is launching, I think, today. Today's Friday, right? And so many other things as an alternative to to higher education or formal business school. And it's based off the chaos pilots in Denmark. It's not accredited, so they chose to find their own pathway. Edwin Debray and Bianca Sackerman talk about de-hierarching hierarchical organizations, organizational flattening, where we start to use networks and social networks in new ways to operate organizations where everybody is working to just do the best thing for the organization. And they talk quite extensively about cost savings that organizations are running into, increases in effectiveness, particularly in areas that we thought were hopeless, like healthcare, right? Making some huge impacts there. Christine Reynaud is from Montreal. She talks about this relationship as the ultimate pedagogy, how things are changing from, things are changing towards people to people to people, co-teaching, co-constructivism, as opposed to the old formats that we had. She has a business called E180, it's at e-180.com, that organizes essentially kind of meetups at cafes or elsewhere where people can have co-teaching, co-learning experiences, and utilizes social media and great ways to make that happen. And Ronald Pamenhoff provides the last main chapter on Nomad's new value creation. He founded a business called Seats to Meet, which is really a nomadic working space. Or a co-working space. There are quite a few here. I think he's got a great model because you can go in, you can co-work for free. Free coffee, which is great. Great Wi-Fi works well. You want to stay around for lunch, you have access to that. They make their money off of leasing out conference rooms. But they also add a social media element to it where you have to sign in advance. So it's always good to know if there's enough room for you. But kind of like what Xtune is doing, you have to fill in a take cloud of what you're working on, what your skills are. So if you have a startup, but you need some advice on PHP or graphic advice on something, you can look around and see who's working on stuff. And there's cultural rules there that say, if somebody asks you for help, you're pretty much obliged to help your co-worker. It's kind of cool. Talks about that a bit and value creation. But then the afterword is by Gary Hart. He is a United States Senator. He ran for president in the 1980s, and he provides a nice capstone on so what's it going to take. That's really all I have to share with that. It's online for your viewing. If you wish to check it out or previewing. Do not share the link publicly yet because this is still very much in draft mode. But I'd like your feedback. What do you think? And where we can take this. And I'm going to stop playing blah, blah, blah so we can have a conversation. So I went blah, blah, blah for too long, didn't I? You're asleep.
We've had an error stop.
It
It doesn't open? nomadsociety.com/book.
Yeah, but we have to still reach back to
Something that's going wrong there. Yeah, so let's troubleshoot that, but that link should work. Yes,
For
sir.
me, on the Dolphin browser, it doesn't work, but on Opera it works. On an Android device. So I don't know what. I can show it to you how it looks like on Dolphin, but Firefox I didn't try.
All right.
Opera works.
Try a different browser. Yeah, it works on Safari.
the Chrome works, but with Firefox doesn't.
Does it come up with just like a little black box?
Yeah.
Yeah, the same thing with me, with one of the browsers.
That's good to know. Actually,
yeah, that's how I got it to work with Opera.
yeah.
I think it needs those 3 W's.
Sorry?
It needs those 3 W's. And those 10 those.
Yeah, it should
Didn't
make a
it did
difference.
not. For me, it was www, and it still was just a little black box.
To investigate that, see what's going on. But oh, I know what's going on. I use a caching service, and it's probably screwing up. So I can disable that. It should work. So tonight, if I get back online, I'll do that. Cool. What do you guys think? Start thinking about the future of work and the roles of social media to create smarter communities. So to really address the questions that Carrie was bringing up, of using rather than being used.
Sounds like the way it's okay. Okay. Yeah.
You seem to be so interested in this coming book, new book. Maybe you want to read it now, or still want to continue discussing.
No, but I mean, definitely feel from my personal view, I would agree with the stuff you said about work changing that way, and also the way you've referred to technology as like the error in using technology in the way of it being a value in itself, which it has been like in the thinking in like the past, I don't know, 5 years. Technology for itself, like we have this tool, hence we have to use it for something, without a thought of like why.
Yeah.
What's the goal of using a given tool?
Yeah,
But,
you shouldn't use technology just for the sake of using.
Yeah, exactly.
Tools. You have to think of the purpose of use.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not purpose, but purposive. So how are you going to actually use it or create meaning?
Yeah.
And too often we wind up using new technologies to do the same old shit.
Yeah.
Rather than doing new things that hadn't been possible.
Yeah.
And this is a real challenge that people have to stop thinking about replicating old stuff and start thinking about, okay, so how can we use our imagination, our creativity, and apply them towards innovations and create new stuff, create stuff that doesn't exist. These are things that kids in school should do.
Yeah.
Rather than repeating back, products or ideas that work well in tests, but we got to create new stuff.
Yeah, I mean, from the point of view of the society, used to be so that you learn a set of skills and then you can use that set of skills for the rest of your life. Nowadays, what I've heard company leaders say that what they need is people who are able to think outside of the box. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Who can come up with solutions to answers we didn't know existed 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much what you were saying.
Yeah, and that people seem to forget the box. We tend to think of companies as a box, or demand that people think out of the box. You get a lot of people in a room like this and say, "Okay, nobody leaves until we each come up with 5 good ideas." Come on.
Yeah.
Industrial approaches to creativity just don't work that way.
Yeah.
People don't work that way. We need to start embracing things in ways that are much more natural.
Yeah.
Rather than letting them get in the way.
Yeah. And the whole incentive system, in the way we naturally think, like you reward certain behavior and you think you get more of it, or you punish something and you think you get less of it, and then it turns out it doesn't quite work that way, especially in something that requires cognitive skill and problem solving.
Human skill, yeah. Human nature works in very different ways to that. Reward and punishment systems. But we've adopted them. basis on old command chains. They're created by the Catholic Church and people that ruled us.
I mean, the reward punishment works well for mechanistic jobs.
Yeah.
For factory line.
Yeah. So this is a faulty product. What can we do to fix that in the factory line? And factory lines have even innovated in ways that transcend what we're doing in school. So the Toyota plant, any worker can stop the entire production line if they find an issue, right? And they're not punished for it, whatever. What if you're in school and a kid could just stop the entire, school production system? It doesn't happen. So we're even older than modern industrial production.
Yeah.
It's scary. Well, she's asleep.
Well, what do you think about the future of the school? Because learning can't learn without school today.
Do we need schools?
Finland,
Yeah. Do we need schools? I mean, this is something that we need to really think about. Or do we all need schools and reschooling? Do we need to unlearn and relearn? Is this something that is the function of school something that we could embed fluidly into society and make into a social mechanism, something that we just do naturally? Because seriously, if only 25% of us will work in the near future, then the role of schools as daycare doesn't make any sense. And I think a lot of people are going to start to reconsider things. Yes, ma'am.
I think in USA, the whole atmosphere for working is completely different from work, from Finland.
Yeah.
And you have several jobs at the same time. And I think that in Europe, like in Japan, you are used to have this job from university until you retire.
That's changing.
Yes, it's changing.
That's changing.
But it's so dramatic that when everybody knows that if you change from one area to the other, you have to learn something new. It's not easy to learn after school because it depends on you. You are willing to first of all know what you want and what are available jobs.
You need metacognition. Maybe this is something that should be taught in schools. Metacognitive ability to know what you do not know. And this is, I think, part of creating a social function or learning as a social thing. We can have smart conversations, so you start to go, oh, I don't know that. Maybe I want to learn more about it. I want to investigate it some more. Through other conversations, using formal learning tools, informal tools. But you need to start to enable this sort of metacognitive sense of knowing what we do not know.
At this moment, we have about one generation which do not have example, and they are under protection.
Yeah.
And they are so young, and if they don't get protection now, probably they don't get.
They may be screwed, and they're very unhappy because the golden future that they're promised, that if they would study hard, complete school, get a job, get married, have 2 kids, retire, buy a house, retire, all these things, they have this sort of happiness. But now most of those things aren't even options. We call ourselves free societies too, but we still say, I got to do this, that. But if those aren't options, if the promise of retirement that they're trained for to become loyal employees through retirement, and if all that training is irrelevant, that's a depressing situation to be in.
I know that it's not fun.
Yeah, and when you're, say, 40 years older and you start to think about retirement, maybe you won't want to retire. Maybe you want to continue working.
Okay.
I talk too much, sorry.
I think it's now time to thank John for have to go up and
You can wait.